93 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with Adam Caplan, powered by InsideTheBirds.com.
I think we have the ability to do something really special with this group, but it's going to take a lot of hard work.
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Yeah, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. Football at 4. Adam Caplan is our guest today. We got a lot to dive into as news around the NFL and the Eagles. Minicamp possible. Training camp. When is the next time we will see the Eagles at the NovaCare Complex? We got an update on that and more. We'll bring in Adam Caplan, InsideTheBirds.com, here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Welcome back, Adam. How are you?
Gil and Broads, good to be with you guys. I had been away for a week in the Outer Banks, but I am back and well-rested, and actually got a haircut on my little foray. Yeah, how about that? So I paid $14 for someone to take a razor and just trim my hair down, so that was worth it. As my wife said, though, she'll take care of the rest. But the bottom line is I'm glad that so there's some positivity with coaches allowed to go back. Not every team may send their coaches back. It's just going to be a matter of what the individual preference is and what kind of testing, Mike. That's the other thing with the NFL's announcement. So I know that's got some particular interest in Philly.
So what is the possibility then for minicamps? Is that now? I mean, that sounded like it was something. And is that kind of off the table now? People are hearing that, the coaches can go back, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have minicamps, or do you think that's still a possibility?
No, I've not heard that the players will be returning at all. But I will tell you the one thing that there might be some hope. I'm going to take you involved in I had a conversation with a NFC West personnel exec, and I happened to ask this guy about one of the players coming back, and if he knew when he'd be back and available, would he be ready for the season or not? He said, here's the problem. Our medical staff cannot get a hold of this player. They can't see him. The guy cannot rehab in our building. He's doing it on his own, so we're not going to know. And that's the issue, Mike, that teams face. Rehabbing players who are rehabbing on their own, obviously with supervision outside, they're being told how to handle the rehab. Until teams could really look at these players, like Alshon Jeffrey, for instance, the Eagles will not know where he's at until he could come in their building. They could take a look at him, until their doctors could take a look at him. That is the problem now facing NFL teams, that they cannot get a real ballpark idea of when players will be able to return.
Yeah, that's interesting because, you figure that they would have some sort of contact with these guys to be able to ask them, like, how are you doing, or can we?
They can,
yeah.
but they cannot examine them.
Exactly. They can't get the doctor to look at them.
Exactly. And by the way, that is why we've seen over a half dozen players, these players who have agreed to deals, but the deals didn't go through. It's almost all of them is that the team doctor was not able to examine the player, and they were not comfortable with the neutral doctor, and that's this is a problem, and hopefully that'll stop here. And by the way, some of these free agents that are still out there, these street free agents, they'll get signed once players are allowed to be in the building. These players can take physicals. Yeah,
and Adam, typically that June 1st date that just passed is usually a pretty big day in the NFL. It kind of seemed like it came and went. Was there any new? I saw one team gained a bunch of cap space. I think it was Atlanta that ended up getting a bunch of cap space because of the June 1st. You usually see a lot of those guys, lopped off the salaries and the salary caps.
Yeah, so what that is, the post-June 1 rule is where you could spread the cap hit, which is they only do it when the cap hit's significant. You could spread it over 2 years instead of just taking on 1 year. And by the way, once you see these teams recoup this cap space, they typically will sign free agents over the next couple weeks. So we may see a little bit of movement, but some of these free agent deals that were agreed to have not gone through. They have not shown up on the team's official transaction report or the league's transaction report, simply because these players cannot get physicals.
Crazy times, obviously, going on out there. And you talk about the impact then of, we thought, possibly having minicamp. We had discussed it about a week or so ago of, hey, getting those rookies in here, getting to see Jalen Ertz and obviously Jalen Reagor, and trying to find a plan for them. But the impact and the issues with players not being able to practice now until training camp.
Yeah, Mike, we actually, the Inside the Bird show, which dropped this morning, which you could find on any platform, Jeff Mosher and I actually talked about this exact subject, about the problem that you're having of not getting players on the field. And as Doug Peterson said, grass. on your getting them into your own state, your own facility, being able to practice is exactly what you need to have. So here's the problem. Once we get to training camp in late July and these players have not been on the field, this is their first exposure to the coaches. And we also mentioned on this show, there are a lot of new coaches on both sides of the football, particularly on offense, that these coaches don't know these players. They've watched the tape of them, college tape for the rookies in particular, but they've never been on the field with them. This is something maybe I'm a little bit too bullish on Jalen Reagor. I mean, I think he's going to be a fantastic player for him. But until these coaches, and by the way, until the new receivers coach, Aaron Moorhead, sees him on the field, they're not going to be able to teach him on the field. This is definitely an issue which we need to keep an eye on.
Now, do you think Adam Caplan's with us, Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com? The NFL releasing their memo saying beginning tomorrow, coaching staffs may be among the employees returning to the facility. Well, do you think they would be able to say injured players one at a time could go back and get checked out? I mean, is that something that's a possibility?
That's not on this memo, but I will tell you that some of the coaches I talked to thought that by the end of June, a small group of players of just the rehab-type players could come in, but that's not happened yet. And quite frankly, it doesn't really matter if the coaches are there. It really matters most if the players are there because the coaches can work remotely as they've done. I'll tell you a little story. I was talking to a position coach this week. So I said, hey, what time are you done every day? He goes, well, I normally would be done at 9 or 10 o'clock at night during OTAs, but he goes, I'm done at 5 o'clock because we don't have any players to coach. We're basically just giving them their online teaching, and that's it. We don't have any tape to review. So this has been completely different, and I just wonder how well this will go in late July, early August when the coaches are with the players.
Yeah, and I was just going to follow up about that too. You would wonder if that's the next thing is being like, hey, can't we let a position in at a time? You get 4 or 5 guys in a room. You're allowed to have 10 guys in a room now. Would you be able to say, hey, Mondays quarterbacks can come in and Tuesdays the running back room? I mean, it seems like at this point now that there is a lot more leniency in terms of how many people, and that would be the next step.
Right. Now, the big thing is what I talked about on your show a couple weeks ago, the equity rule. All 32 teams must be able to practice, or none of them can. That I don't think that's going to change because that is a major competitive advantage. If you have a bunch of teams practicing, I don't care if it's a dozen or all 90 men, and then the other teams can't have their players in there, that's not right, and that will never pass. That's why it's called the rule of equity. I'd be shocked if anything like that happened. Again, there's nothing on the horizon. Right now, as of right now, things could change because the league seems to put out 2 memos a week. But, boy, you're right, Mike. It would be great if they could get some players in there.
Which player do you think will be impacted the most by this offseason outside of the undrafted players? Do you think it'll be Dillard, Reagor, maybe even Jalen Mills or Sidney Jones?
Yeah, Hunter, I obviously Reagor because he's a rookie and he's not getting any on-field time. Andre Dillard, when we did the ITV TV show, which you could see on YouTube when we did it with Trey Thomas, Trey did a tremendous job of explaining Dillard's issues. It was less about physical strength. It was more about his hand usage. Well, the hand usage thing will get corrected, but the problem is it can't get corrected until he's on the field. So that Hunter, to answer your question, that would be, I would say Reagor and Dillard for sure. There's no doubt about it. And then the secondary, you've got a new secondary coach, Marquise Manuel, and he's got these new players. They're going to have, guys, they're going to have 2 new starters actually 3 new starters at corner. Maddox is starting on the outside for now, unless Jones takes his job. Nicole Roby-Coleman's their slot, and then obviously Darius Slay is their other outside corner. So they've got the brand new secondary here. 3 out of 4 guys are new starters, and they're not unable to get on the field. So there's definitely some challenges here, which certainly should not be overlooked.
Adam Caplan, Football at 4, powered by Inside the Birds. Now, in a recent Ask ITB, you talked about Miles Sanders in the running back spot. And I'm interested in this because Miles Sanders, you lived 15 to 18 carries. Veteran running back, 6 to 8. Boston Scott, 3 to 5. I'm kind of intrigued. We've been asking a lot about Boston Scott this week and what his role is. But I guess it's tied to what they think Miles Sanders' role might be. And if they bring a veteran in, maybe that guy gets 6 to 8. But what if they don't bring another guy in and this is the group of guys they go? Does Scott's role then change? Does it mean a bigger role for Miles Sanders?
All right, yeah. So let's take a deep dive in this. I actually have not addressed this very much. So if they sign, and it's highly unlikely because Devontae Freeman wants so much money. The Eagles want him, but he just wants way too money. The Buccaneers went on record, confirmed what I put out there 3 weeks ago that Freeman is overvaluing himself. So right now, if the season started today, it's really going to be Sanders and then Boston Scott and Corey Clement backing him up. Those will be the two main backups. Now, Scott's role would increase significantly. Now, what if they sign LaShawn McCoy, who I'm told, and I put this out several weeks ago, that the Eagles ranked him lower than Carlos Hyde and Freeman, but let's just say that they would sign Shady at 32 years old. I think Scott's role will be a little bit bigger than I initially anticipated because I just don't know what LaShawn McCoy could handle work-wise. So I think you could probably raise that to 5 to 7 touches. They do love Boston Scott, but he's a certain type of running back. And Corey Clement, they know he's got great versatility, but he has a significant injury history. They really want, and I can't make this point enough, they really want to get a veteran in there because if Sanders does suffer an injury, he's the guy. No one's debating that in Overcare. He's special. They know that. If he gets hurt, what are they going to do? It's a real problem, and that's the dilemma they face because there's just not – after Shady, there's just not very much out there in the veteran free agent market.
And that's where it seems that the veteran guy has the most value is if Sanders got hurt. Otherwise, it's almost like – and, I mean, that's a big thing is if the guy gets hurt, you want a guy that you can count on because otherwise you're going with Boston Scott and Elijah Well, we keep not mentioning Corey Clement. Is he not in there – are they not excited about him? Is he just one of those names that they bring back because he's a warm body or because they trust him?
No, they trust him in terms of his role. Jack of all trades, really good special teams player. Could handle third down if you need him to. He could pass protect. You could handle short yardage. You could have him in the red zone. They know by the roadmap of 2017, he basically did everything, and he was an incredible story. Now, talking to a couple team sources, they really want to take a look in training camp at Elijah Holyfield. They really had a draftable grade, a couple years ago, and obviously he was on Carolina's practice squad last season. They like his size. They think he runs better than his 40 time, but again, he's never played in an NFL game. Neither is Michael Warner and Adrian Killen. So they don't have a lot of answers. They have a lot of questions behind Miles Sanders, and that is the issue going forward at running back. They can't just go in with a couple untested guys. They need someone who could handle volume behind Sanders if Sanders were to suffer an injury.
The more I think about it, if Sanders does go down without signing the veteran running back, we've seen how he pull off moves in the middle of the year, like for JJ Ajayi before. So could they bank on something like that?
I don't think they would trade for one. That would surprise me. Now, let's move this forward. Let's say they don't sign Shady McCoy, and they don't pick up a journeyman back right now, and they wait till August, and they don't like what's out there. Then yes, they could look to acquire someone sometime in August, but they want to kind of have an idea of who that guy's going to be behind Sanders because, look, it really worked out when they had – they're not going to have a committee this year, but in 2017 they did because they didn't have a featured back. It was Blunt. It was Ajayi, Hunter, obviously at the trade deadline. It was Clement who shocked the world, came out of nowhere as an undrafted free agent out of Wisconsin. That's kind of the way that they saw it in 17. But now it's really been, as one team source said to me, he goes, look, when we had Shady in 09, you saw how special he was. We think the same way about Miles Sanders. So I expect similar usage. It may not be 20 touches a game, but I think Mike and Hunter, it's going to be that 15 to 18 touch game range. That should be kind of what it is per game.
When you asked yourself, what's Shady McCoy's workload, I thought to myself, well, what about Marquise Goodwin? What's his workload like? Because he's a guy who has had a ton of injury. I mean, how much stock and how much can you put on Marquise Goodwin?
You know what's funny, though, Adam, too, and Hunter? We've been, talking to Jeff and Andrew this week. We've talked about how many guys they have and how they can spread the ball. And I don't even know that Goodwin's name has come up. I mean, you've got so many different guys. Like, how do you is he even guaranteed to make the team?
Well, he should wind up being the backup to Deshaun Jackson. I need to find out how they're going to deploy ArcegaWhiteside and Goodwin. But I would think, because it just makes sense that he's a little bit younger than obviously Deshaun, actually 3 years younger, and he could flat out fly. He's a track star, but he has a significant injury history. So, you're not. They restructured his deal, so they actually cut it. They cut it down. He took a major pay cut. But the fact that matters with Goodwin, how many snaps could he handle? I mean, he basically is going to be their fourth or fifth receiver. But, man, I'll tell you what, I remember meeting him at training camp 3 years ago with the Niners. he felt he had a chip on his shoulder coming off from Buffalo because the Bills would not play him. Even when he'd play well, they just didn't believe in him. And he's a pretty good kid. He just has had some challenges with injuries, and he had some personal family stuff they had to attend to. But you're right, Mike. That's the guy who's got a lot of ability. He's yet another home run threat. But the problem is, like a lot of these guys, how much can you depend on them?
Not only how much can you depend on them, how much grass time can they get when you got between, and if Goodwin, it's almost like, who is he up? I mean, is it him against Quez Watkins and John Hightower? Are you going to keep Goodwin over guys you drafted? I mean, essentially, is like that the battle for one spot? Do you keep him because he does similar things to Deshaun Jackson, and if Jackson goes down, that's his role? You got Rieger, who could probably, I feel like it's just an odd mix of a lot of guys who do, I don't want to say, I guess, similar stuff, but it's a nice problem to have compared to what you had last year. By the way, you throw Greg Ward in, too, and you try to figure out what his role, and JJ ArcegaWhiteside with all these different other guys.
Right, so here's the way I see it. Let's put Jeffrey to the side right now. They don't know when he's going to return, but we're going to have an update soon on our show on Inside the Birds. But Jackson and Rieger should open the season as starters, okay? When they go to the three-wide package, it'll either be Rieger or Ward inside, and they could put ArcegaWhiteside and Deshaun on the outside, or Marquise Goodwin, obviously. John Hightower, I'm told that he actually may wind up playing a little slot. You can certainly move. He's more of an outside guy than an inside guy, but he could be a vertical slot. And that's it. They do not see Greg Ward at all outside. They just don't see it. Quez Watkins would be a long shot. As and by the way, listen to the show that we dropped today, because we kind of outline how many receivers we think can make it and what all the roles are. Mike, you're right. It's fascinating. There's a lot that he can do here, but they're not going to know, as you just said, until they could get them in training camp, because you have a new receivers coach, and he's got to get a feel for what these guys can do.
All right, Adam Caplan, Football at 4, powered by Inside the Birds. We got so much intriguing things. You also forget to throw in the two tight ends, Ertz and Goddard, right? I mean, and you would imagine, and this goes back to the wide receiver question, is do they continue with that 12 personnel to get Goddard back on the field, or does he lose playing time because they have other options now that they want to get on the field?
Yeah, okay, so this is a good question. We actually did not go that far, although we said it's going to be primarily a 12 personnel team. So they have a chance to be what's called multiple. They don't have to go 12 personnel all the time. They certainly be well over 50% of 12 personnel, which means 2 receivers, 2 tight ends. But this year, if it all works out, meaning Jackson is relatively healthy, Rieger knows what he's doing, ArcegaWhiteside earns being on the field, and Marquise Goodwin can help them, they're going to, and obviously Greg Ward will play in the slot. They could run 11 personnel, which means one tight end and 3 receivers, a little bit more than last year. So they'll have that ability to do that. And I know they'd like to be able to do that, be able to be a little bit more flexible. Because last year, Mike, what choice did they have? They had to be 12 personnel. They were so bad at receiver. I mean, this is all they could do is run 12 personnel. God forbid one of their tight ends got hurt last year. It would have been really, really tough to watch them.
Do you think keeping Ertz and Goddard are in the Eagles' long-term plans? Yeah,
look, they're my understanding is that the Ertz deal will not get done if it does get done. It won't get done until George Kittle gets his deal done, and that'll happen before training camp. That George Kittle is arguably the NFL's best tight end. Now, the challenge, Hunter, is this. If you extend Ertz's contract, do you extend Goddard's after the season? You could begin to extend him next year after the season. You could do it in January if you want to. The question is, how do you pay him if you've already paid Ertz? No team has ever paid anywhere close to 2 tight ends market value. That's a very challenging situation. That's one of many that Howie Roseman, the general manager of the Eagles, and their front office staff has when it comes to the 2021 salary cap and structuring contracts. That will not be easy to do.
Great stuff on today's Football 4. Adam Caplan, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. I want to run real quick on JJ ArcegaWhiteside because he was a second-round pick, and he feels like he's been written off, and we're talking about getting guys on the field. Does the organization have a plan for him? We've talked so much about, they got what's the plan for this guy, that guy. Is he even in their plans? I mean, are we just assuming that he's a second-round pick and they're going to put him back in their plans, or is he a guy that they're not all that excited about?
No, he's in their plans, and they want him to be a physical presence at the receiver position. They don't have one without Alshon. Marquise Goodwin's a smaller player. Rieger he's under 5'10". Deshaun, he's 5'11". But although I will tell you, he's bulked up, about as bulked up as he's ever never going to be his. He's pretty well developed his body. He's got a really good personal trainer, but they don't have anyone who can go get the football from a physical presence without Jeffrey. So, yeah, that they want him to be that guy, Mike, to answer your question. But the question is, if he does earn that role, how many snaps is that? Does that give you? They don't know that because, again, this would have been solved. I could tell you from going to OTAs and the mandatory minicamp for decades, you could pretty much figure out what roles are going to be by, I would always take notes being at practice, but there's no notes because they're not able to do this. They're not on the field. So whatever a coach will tell you in the offseason without getting on the field, I mean, I believe what they're telling me, but I just don't take a lot of faith in that's going to happen until they get on the field. You just don't know. They can't evaluate them until they get out there.
One thing I think is interesting is what happens if JJ Arcega-Whiteside is actually having a great bounce-back year and he's doing well, and then Alshon Jeffrey returns, and now you got to find a way to get both of them on the field in the same spot.
Yeah, Hunter, that's a great problem to have, if he's ready. If he could help them. The issue is he'll be on PUP to start training camp. The issue for Jeffrey is will he be on PUP to start the regular season? That's called reserve PUP, which means you miss 6 weeks. So they're going to have a decision to make, and the question because it's a 9 to 12 month rehab, and I know you guys had Malik Jackson on, I think in April, if I'm not mistaken, and I think Malik told you, Mike, that he just got fitted for shoes. If I remember exactly what he told you. So remember, his surgery was in September.
Yeah.
And you're talking about 7 months later that he's just going to start to run. That puts Alshon basically on pace to be maybe potentially ready sometime in September, but they're not going to get in. Remember, by the way, they can't take a look at him until he can get into the facility.
Right. I would imagine that Carson Wentz is excited about what we're talking about. I mean, if he was listening in on this, he's probably smiling like, yeah, you're right. I do have a lot of options. Now, how do I keep them all happy?
You know what? I want to bring up one thing. Speaking of Wentz, now he didn't have help in the final quarter of the season. Jeff and I, particularly myself, I was very critical of Carson for not trusting his pass targets. You could tell. My sources told me that you could tell with the guys that he was working with, the guys like Deontay Burnett, Shelton Gibson, Robert Davis, guys who shouldn't have been on the field. He was not trusting them initially, and then at some point, something happened where he almost threw caution in the wind and said, "You know what? I just got to get the job done. We're not getting the playoffs unless I trust these guys." And he wound up trusting them, and they started making plays for him. And that not a ton of them, but enough where you go, okay, these guys at least they're doing something. And that's a credit to Carson because it's tough sometimes when you work with guys who probably aren't good enough. But Carson got the job done. I do give him that credit.
It should be fun. Hopefully, we do get the training camp and it's not delayed. What is the actual start area for training? We usually like late mid-July-ish.
Usually around the 25th. Usually around like the 23rd. The rookies come in, and then the veterans come in. Sometimes a couple days later. It just depends. This year's going to be unique. Now, one thing before we get out of here, the testing is very important. Okay, each NFL building, not just the Eagles, they have to have testing in place that works before you can have people in the building. So keep an eye on that over the next couple weeks.
All right, Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. Adam Caplan, our guest tomorrow. It is Andrew DeCecco. We'll talk more about the Eagles and the NFL moving forward through the summer. And, of course, as training camp gets here, we'll have you covered during Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. He is Adam Caplan at Caplan NFL. Take care, pal.
Guys, thank you.
All right, Adam Caplan here on the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN.